District 00 Chapter 8, Dream Sequence 2 Charlie at Seoul, South Korea Episode 1, 15 February 2021. Kim wasn't the same child assassin we'd known. Whatever chemicals or hormones that the North Korean mad scientists had injected her with to cause her metamorphosis was reaching the end of its half-life. She was enraged most of the time and was physically aggressive. She attempted to harm herself and others who got close to her. She was fast and strong, acting more like a feral child with complete and utter disregard for her own safety or the safety of others. She bit and scratched and, mimicking a dog's sleeping posture, curled up in the fetal position. Her face had grown larger by at least 30%. Her body had increased in muscle mass with long, untamed hair covering most, if not all, of her face. She also had a man's deep voice. Her eyes were devoid of color, her retinas blended in with her eyeballs, displaying no distinct color to distinguish them from anything else. She spoke no human language. She made eerie jangling noises with saliva dripping from her mouth each time she opened it. Her cell was our first stop. Our squad of 6 had been tasked with handling a very small portion of District 00. Other squads had been tasked with handling the remaining residences. First Lieutenant Duke, 4 civilian dignitaries, 2 former mayors from Iceland and 2 former congresspersons from Gambia, and I made up the squad. For the next 12 hours, we intended to stay in one piece. From the briefing, we'd learned that the residents of District 00 leaned toward killing. They were fully psychotic, having lost their sanity and been transformed into raving savages. Among the residents were the mutated bulldogs and other creatures being used as science experiments someone had captured. Kudos to whomever had captured those creatures. The 4 dignitaries stood about 25 meters away from Kim's cell. Their silence meant that they despised Kim, they detested all the captured creatures. They reviled the post-nuclear environment and loathed anything and everything having to do with the Korean peninsula. One of them threw a moldy bagel at the child. It hit her in the head. She woke up and immediately went into frantic mode. She screamed with both hands reaching out toward the 4 civilians. Jamie and I stood back and watched. If Kim were to escape from her cell, then she would undoubtedly track down anyone who had treated her poorly, starting with those 4. Another civilian poked Kim's head with a stick that she carried as a weapon. Kim caught the stick and snatched it from her tormentor. The child swung it widely. For the next several minutes, Jamie and I watched in disbelief. It was obvious that the Norwegians were ignorant of the Geneva Convention regulations concerning the well-being of any prisoner of war. Either that or they didn't give a shit about rules and regulations. I caught Jamie by the upper arm and held her back from intervening on the child's behalf. I know, Major Sray, watch, listen, and learn, First Lieutenant Jamie Duke said, repeating the mantra I'd taught her when she first arrived. One of the civilians made funny faces at Kim. The other 3 laughed. That enraged the child. She threw a stick at them. They ducked, laughed, and pointed their fingers at her. Kim screamed with both hands grabbing onto the steel bars and shaking them violently. She wanted to get out. The warden of District 00 came by with 4 assistants. Warden Johan Syr was from Sweden. The former Attorney General of Sweden, he was tall with a full head of hair and large eyeglasses. His 4 assistants were dignitaries from a number of countries. Warden Syr stood with his hands crossed as he frowned at the 4 dignitaries who were teasing Kim. He frowned at Jamie and me briefly, his narrowed eyes implying that we 2 members of the military were as guilty as the 4 civilians for not intervening on the child's behalf. Is there a problem? Warden Syr asked. The 4 civilians looked passively at the warden, then dismissed him altogether. At least they had stopped teasing Kim, who at this point was furious. She screamed at the top of her lungs as she gnashed her teeth. Foam had formed in the corners of her mouth. She was acting as if she were demon-possessed. Warden Syr and the 4 civilians challenged each other to a staring contest. He looked intently at them with contempt and vice versa. His 4 assistants, Jamie, and I stood in silence, yearning for a fist fight to take place among them. The background sounds were coming from the captured creatures, Kim, accused spies, and those who had lost their sanity. The group of 4 moved on to their next target, having totally unheeded Warden Sir's inquiry. The next cell, several feet from Kim's and to the left, held one of the mutated creatures. It didn't look like any domesticated animal I'd ever seen. Perhaps before it had fully mutated, it was a domesticated animal, possibly a house pet belonging to a family with young kids. The moment it sensed a threat, it went into full offense mode. It rammed its head against the steel bars repeatedly, trying to get out. Its black eyes had no retinas. The whole eyeball was the same pale color, large and spherical. It had 4 muscular legs, and at the end of each leg was a set of lethal claws several meters long. Its entire body and tail were hairless, and its body color was deep black. Its fangs and teeth were as sharp as razor blades. It bit and chewed on the metal bars persistently. Jamie and I stood behind the 4 civilian dignitaries, who were standing and watching with apprehension. They acted as if the subject were the Black Plague on 4 legs. They despised the sight of it, the way it sounded, and the way it smelled. None of the rest of us was exactly in love with any of the captured creatures. It wasn't our job to like or dislike any of the creatures, including Kim. Our task was to check up on the offenders. If the offenders were dead, then we were supposed to make a note of it. Simple enough, it was the easiest task available. Every squad dreamed of being assigned to this detail. If the squad was made up of military members, then this was an easy task where they could remain laid back. But with civilians, things were unpredictable. They didn't particularly like to follow rules or regulations. One of the civilians, a female, decided to sign her own death warrant. She went and sat directly in front of the enraged brute. The ogre's left front claws were a mere inch away from her face. She took off her left shoe and smacked the fiend's left leg, screaming, "Bad monster." District 00 Chapter 8. Dream Sequence 2 Charlie at Seoul, South Korea Episode 1, 15 February 2021. Kim wasn't the same child assassin we'd known. Whatever chemicals or hormones that the North Korean mad scientists had injected her with to cause her metamorphosis was